Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to Buying Real Estate with Friends, protecting your investment and friendship, and also creating your ideal housing. This event is put on by CoHo BC, the Collaborative Home Ownership Initiative. My name is Noam Dolgan, and I'm here today with Brian Horowitz and David Hale, who will introduce themselves in a bit. And we're delighted to talk a little bit about this growing trend in real estate and how to help you actualize it and actualize it in a smart, thought through, and safe manner. Oops. Before we get too deep into it, it's important to acknowledge, especially when we're talking about property stewardship and property ownership in British Columbia, that we are talking about the lands that are the ancestral, unceded, and historic territories of many different nations across the province. And we acknowledge and appreciate the years of stewardship that those communities have done, and we take our responsibility as modern stewards of the land very seriously, which is why we want to try to create better housing, more community-oriented housing, more sustainable housing on every front. So what is CoHo BC? CoHo BC is an initiative that works to promote co-ownership as a viable and valuable housing option for people across the province. We work to provide resources and professional support to assist groups going through the co-ownership process. We work in the creation of co-ownership groups through a dating pool, a chance for people to meet other like-minded individuals or other families to buy together. And we facilitate the resale or the sale of shared interest in properties to other potential buyers and partners. Today, we'll clearly be focused mostly on friend groups, so we won't be talking about those last two categories. But there's definitely a lot of stuff happening in this growing field, and we're happy to support it at many levels. So who are we, the people who make up CoHo BC? We're a collection of professionals, real estate agents like myself, David, and Brian, lawyers, builders, financial institutions, architects, mediators, even folks working as matchmakers, all with expertise and experience in collective housing, co-ownership, to really guide you through the process from start to finish, and make sure you are making all the right decisions and having all the right conversations along the way. So don't reinvent the wheel, use the experts. Co-ownership is not a uniquely BC phenomenon. CoHo is part of an international movement of organizations across the US, Eastern Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, all looking at this as a form of housing that's necessary to help address the high cost of real estate and the growing isolation people are feeling in society. So before we get too deep in, we'll introduce ourselves. Again, my name is Noam Dolgan. I'm a realtor based out of Metro Vancouver who specializes in co-ownership, sustainable living, and green homes. I like to just think real homes for real people and outside the box real estate thinking. I come at this because before entering real estate, I worked in environmental education and institutional greening and community development. So really, when I came into looking at housing and property, it was really with a triple bottom line approach that our housing needs to be good for ourselves financially, of course, good for building community for ourselves and others, and good for the planet. And co-ownership really does, I think, do that for a lot of people. And I do own property with friends and family as well. I have found that co-ownership has really worked for me in my life. We're also joined today by Brian Horowitz, our Mid-Island and Gulf Islands specialist, as well as a rural lands expert. Brian, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Good to be here. Thanks for showing up. I've been involved on a personal level of co-ownership for about 5 years now, and on a professional level about 4 years now, and focusing on properties up and down the island. I primarily work out of Cowichan, have quite a few supporting agents in the area, and it's wonderful to see people moving away from their fears, embracing this housing hack, as some would call it, and starting to realize the benefits that co-ownership has to offer. I work in all sorts of different capacities, and it's wonderful to see more and more people starting to move away from talking about it and dreaming about it and making it happen. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell as a co-ownership specialist and real estate agent here on Vancouver Island.
Thank you, Brian. Uh, David Hale is also with us, our Victoria affiliated agent and the founder of Shared Home Ownership Victoria, the local CoHo affiliate. David, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Noam, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I live in the Victoria area and work in the greater Victoria area. Been selling real estate here for 30 plus years, and I've always been interested in supplying and making available affordable housing. And for me, shared home ownership is a no-brainer. And I think it's the silver bullet that we have available to us for as a solution to the crazy prices that we have found ourselves in. Uh, Real estate is not going to go down. It's going to start to go up again. And so we just have to figure out a way to get into the market, build some equity, help others at the same time. So there's lots of scenarios, older folks that have lots of equity, allowing a younger person in with not so much equity, but that can look after the place. Older folks have a chance to sort of basically semi-retire, go south in the winter, that type of thing. Younger people have an opportunity to start building some wealth where they thought that renting was their only hope, that's all they could accomplish in their life. So just happy to be involved and proud to be supporting the community and helping people get into the affordable housing. Thanks, Noam.
Thank you, David, for being here. So co-ownership is not a new concept. Right? Before 1966 in BC, there was no Strata Act. So if you wanted to own larger pieces of real estate, you often had to come together. I mean, even well before that, for generations, families and clans, right, have owned and managed properties together. In the 60s and 70s, ownership co-ops were popular. In the 90s to the present, we're seeing co-housing initiatives, which I can talk more about later. And in general, through all times, at all price points, we've seen families coming together to buy, friends as well, to a lesser extent, investment collaborations, timeshares, like fractional vacation properties. So there's a lot of different examples of how co-ownership has worked for people. And in fact, all stratified products, all condos, duplexes, townhomes, are all co-owned to some degree. It was a legal mechanism to facilitate co-ownership of property. But now there's a lot more potential beyond just the stratified properties. And so we're seeing a real growth and a lot more need, a real growth in the movement. So there are many advantages to co-ownership. I'll go through more of them later, but the big draws that seem to bring most people into co-ownership are to build community and mutual support systems, know your neighbors before you buy, right? Not just get into a condo with a bunch of random strangers. You don't know what their vision is and what kind of neighbors they'll make, but being able to buy with friends, with family, with people you know and trust to have more community in your life. And we really all saw firsthand during COVID how important it was to have community close by, and has made this even more relevant to people. The biggest draw we hear people coming in for, of course, is to save money, to get more housing for their limited dollar in an expensive market. Or you can, of course, you can get more for your money. So more space, more yard, more resources available to you. And another big draw that people don't think about necessarily off the bat is that they can live in otherwise unavailable locations. So you can live in what are traditionally single family neighborhoods, which are most of our urban centers. You can live on acreage in a way that you couldn't necessarily do with a budget, with a condo type budget. And who co-owns? We see a lot of different groups co-owning: intergenerational families, individuals, young families, friends, of course, why you're here today. first-time buyers looking to get in the market, downsizers, investors, seniors looking to do, maybe a Golden Girls type situation, or just to be, have people close by who can look after them and be a social network. So we're seeing groups of friends, in their 20s who are buying together for the first time getting the market, and 30s, in their 30s and 40s who are having children and are being able to afford better housing for their families, at that stage. And then we're seeing again with singles in their 50s and upwards, 40s, 50s and upwards, or who are coming together to say, I don't need a big house. I don't need to be in a box. I just need to be with people who I trust and like, and get more housing and better housing together. So what co-ownership can look like is really up to you, right? Especially when it comes to friend groups, you really have the opportunity to talk together and explore what each of you needs and wants in housing and how you can work together to create that. Some folks do communal living, right? Sharing a house, a townhouse, or a condo. So again, if you're at a stage in life, where you would be living with roommates as a rental anyways, pooling that rental money instead of putting it towards a investor's mortgage, putting it towards your own mortgage and living together for a few years, building some equity so that when you want to move out on your own, if that's your next life stage, you've got the equity to do it, or you as a collective can move up. What we see a lot of groups doing is co-ownership with private dwellings or suites on the property, either a house with multiple suites or a property with multiple homes on the property. So that way it mimics what a stratified condo would look like, right? You're getting your own private dwelling, but the opportunities, and I'll go into more about what they look like later, but the opportunities of co-ownership allow you to, to find that on one property, on one title, and you can work it together. And then we're also seeing people coming together to build land-based businesses such as farms and rentals. And interestingly, now we're seeing more and more people investing in friends or family so they can get into the market. So maybe you're not collectively living on the property, only one of you is living there, but the other person is going to be a co-owner to help facilitate getting you into the market and build some equity for themselves. So how much to share similarly is up to you, right? Are you looking at shared land and ownership, but everyone has a private suite? Or are you looking for a collective home? Do you want to have shared spaces? The yards, most obviously, but sheds, gardens, laundry, workshops. Do you want to have shared resources, tools, cars, garden equipment, hot tub? Do you want to have collective events, meals, and celebrations? Or are you coming together around a particular communal purpose? We see, religious groups coming together to live together and build community in that context. But whatever you're celebrating, you want to celebrate birthdays together. Do you want to have a monthly dinner or a weekly dinner? Really up to you. And what kind of mutual support systems do you want to put in place in your community? Do you want to, promise to do babysitting for one another, shopping when people need it of each other? Are you going to be carpooling? Right. So a lot of folks don't have a lot of that collectivity. They're really just sharing the land. And other folks go into this with much more of that intentionality of building community. So co-ownership is becoming increasingly more popular and more popular than most of us probably imagine. The most recent survey we have here is from 2023, but it showed that a majority of Canadians are open to the concept of co-ownership. And the numbers are higher the younger you are, not so surprisingly, because I think most people are thinking they're not going to be able to afford other ways into the market. But even up to the boomer generation, we're seeing a third of people are open to the model of co-ownership, again, for the reasons that we've mentioned already. And even if we think these numbers are a little bit high, there's been multiple surveys, in the years or before then that basically showed that somewhere around 10 to 25% of people would be open to co-ownership with friends or with family members. So there's tens of thousands of transactions with objections that happen in BC every year. And even if it's just a few percentage of them, this can clearly be a major part of our market. And with good reason, because I think it really can work for a lot of people. So things to consider before we begin the process is some questions like, what is my timeline, right? Do you see this as your forever home, or is it just a 5-year plan? right? Because you want to make sure those visions align with your partners. There are ways to deal with differences down the road, and we'll talk more about them. But ideally, you're trying to get in with people with similar visions and goals, because that's usually your best success. How much communal living do I want? I've already talked a lot about. And what kind of partner do I need? Sometimes it's obvious you want someone who's very similar to you, but sometimes you actually want someone who's very different than you. Either they have skills that you don't have, or traits, or they have very different housing needs. Right? You need a large space, and just because of the reality of the market out there, you're looking for a partner who needs a smaller space to fit the housing options that are available. And then also for qualifications, maybe someone with a lot of down payment could partner up with someone with a really quality job, and together you can qualify for a mortgage and be able to buy a house at a point where neither of you could succeed individually. So here are just some tangible examples of the kind of housing that we see groups of friends buying into together, because just to give you a sense of what this can look like and why I say that it creates a savings or more housing for less money. These are general East Vancouver prices, but this tends to track around the province relative to your own price point. And of course, the housing types are different in each region of the province, but there are definitely shareable houses available throughout. So this is an example of a house that has 2 suites in it. 2 examples here in the pictures. One is what's called a Vancouver Special or a Burnaby Special, depending on where you're living. And it's a 2-story home with a full height above ground level on the ground floor, usually a 2 or 3 bedroom suite, and then a 2 or 3 bedroom suite on the second floor. So well designed for 2 families to live together on. And then the picture on the right is a side-by-side duplex, where you build 2 houses attached to each other, each one of them often identical, though sometimes differentiating. But these properties are clearly designed for 2 families or 2 groups or 2 individuals to come together and be able to live side by side. And these are unstratified products, so you can't own traditionally one half. There's a single title on the property, and so 2 groups can come together and make this kind of thing happen. When you're looking at a traditional half duplex that is stratified in East Vancouver, for example, the prices for a 1,300 square foot duplex start at around 1.5 million, certainly go up from there. So that's, over $1,100, $150 a square foot. Whereas you can co-own a 2,600 square foot Vancouver Special for 2 to 2.2 million. And so you're looking at 1 to 1.1 million each, a significant price savings, and around $800 per square foot. So it's effectively the same product, but because you're co-owning, you're getting it at about a 30% discount in price. Similarly, we see single homes that have been converted into multiple suites, often 1 suite per floor or various configurations. And this can be great for groups of 3 or 4 to co-purchase, each with their own suite in it. In which case, instead of buying a standard 2-bedroom, 850 square foot condo in East Van for around $800,000, or around $950 a square foot, $940, you can co-own a large home with 4 suites in the 2.1 to $2.3 million range, where that same 850 square foot 2-bedroom suite is now only $575,000 or under $700 a square foot. One of my favorite models for co-ownership is when there are 2 homes on a single property. In our urban centers, that often looks like what we call a laneway house. And so this is really an opportunity to have a small secondary dwelling on the property, and similarly can create some great value and community support models when friends want to come together. So you could have, instead of a traditional 1,800 square foot detached home at 1.8 million, you can have a brand new, and that would be an older home. You can have a brand new 2,800 square foot home plus a 700 square foot laneway house and share it 3 ways, right? So somebody on the top 2 floors, that same 1,800 square foot main home, now at 1.5 million, 1,000 square foot, 2 or 3 bedroom basement suites, which can be built to full ceiling height, especially if you're building together to really suit. At 750, which is a large discount on what 1,000 square feet would get you in a condo. And this laneway house, which may only be 700 or 800 square feet, but is a really wonderful little standalone product. Lots of light, no shared walls, direct access to the yard. So three groups coming together can really, each of them can find either a unique product or a better product and a cheaper product, right? You got new, you get more, you get unique all here together. And one of my favorite models actually is with an older home and a newer laneway house on it. So then the price point is closer to 2.2 million. And so again, for less than 1.5 million, the one partner can own the main home for a family or friends, or you can have two people if it's got, you know, 2 stories on it, 2 or 3 stories that are livable, and then another person in the laneway house again. So really housing that was intended for rental or for family, extended family members in terms of its design has great potential for co-ownership in its actuality. So this is a similar situation about multiple homes on acreage, right? So on Vancouver Island or other parts of the province, land has gotten very expensive. But the difference between an acreage with one house on it versus with 2 homes on it is not that high. So instead of owning a home on 5 acres for around 1.2 million in this example, you can own a home with a second cottage on it for around 1.4 million. So the owner of that particular home has now brought their price down to 900,000, and the smaller cottage at around 500,000 is again a really unique opportunity. It's really, you can't get into the acreage market, right, at 500,000, and this gives them a home and access to 5 shared acres for either for forest living or for farming or for whatever you want to do with it. And then collective living. Collective living clearly will be the most affordable because you're sharing kitchens, you're sharing living rooms and dining rooms, so there's a higher efficiency. So instead of buying a 1-bedroom suite for yourself at $550,000 or 900 plus a square foot, you can co-own a 2-bedroom condo at around 375 or $400,000 a piece. You can co-own a townhouse, 3 people, a house with 4 people. And again, for less than the price of that one condo, you now have shared access to much more space, right? To a large yard and to living rooms and dining rooms and maybe a workshop and a nice shed or whatever it might be. So there's really great affordability and great opportunity with the collective housing option. And then, of course, we're seeing friends coming together to create tiny home communities and eco villages and the like. So, you know, coming together, you know, 4 to 20 people to acquire land and put your tiny house on, you can certainly bring your price point down to $50 to $100, $200,000. You know, which really creates a pathway that doesn't otherwise exist. So the advantages of collaborative living, we've talked about most of them already, right? Know your neighbors, have community support, save money, get more space, share resources. And then some other ones that kind of have come up that maybe we wouldn't think about before. Higher quality of housing, right? Like being able to afford a new home for less than the price of an older one. Housing otherwise not available. Laneway homes and small cabins and the ability to access housing that isn't available in the open market generally. And then, of course, if somebody already owns a property and they want to bring a friend onto it, it's an opportunity to gain access to your equity without having to move or face high reverse mortgage fees. There's financial synergy I mentioned earlier, like when someone with a big down payment and someone with a good job and good qualifications come together, where neither of them could buy. Now they can get in. So sometimes your 1 + 1 = 3. You can really create more than each of you individually. And I really do believe this is a triple bottom line housing choice. It is socially, financially, and environmentally a more sustainable way to go. Now, of course, there are challenges. If there weren't challenges, everyone would be doing this all the time, and they wouldn't have the need to create a Strata Act, etc. And the challenges, we'll go more into them. You know, refer to the fact that you all have to be on a mortgage together. Right? That's the #1 concern everyone has: is what happens if my partner stops paying the bill, and we'll get into that in a minute. You want to think about exit strategy, right? Yes, we've agreed on a general timeline that we want to be in this for 15 years or 5 years. But what's going to happen at that point? And also sometimes life changes. What if you die? What if someone dies? Someone divorces? Someone gets to financial difficulty, whatever it might be. So you have to plan for that as well. Delinquency, I just mentioned, and how are you going to deal with ongoing disagreements, repairs, maintenance? What are the roles and responsibilities of everybody, etc. And this is why you work with a group like CoHo BC, because we can help you address these questions in advance, have a plan, partner you up with the right lawyers who can create a well thought through partnership agreement, and have all those things in place in advance. Far too often we hear about people who call me after and say, "Oh, I just bought a place with my friend. Now what do I do?" And you can certainly do the co-ownership agreement at that stage. But if you have any disagreements, you've already committed to buying this property. So you really want to work upfront to deal with all these considerations early in the process, so you know what you're getting into before you commit. So to these points, right, with financing, you must be on the mortgage together. There are products like at the bottom, but like the Vensity's Mixer Mortgage, which allow for accounting. It simplifies accounting and allows one person to, let's say, go fixed mortgage, one person to go variable mortgage, pay down at different rates. So there are some useful products out there, but at the end of the day, you are still on the hook for each other. Fortunately, we make sure your partners are protected with their down payments. It's the kind of thing we generally encourage folks to do with 20% down, not 5% down, just to make sure that everybody has solid skin in the game. With a good underlying land purchase, of course, due diligence on the property, so the property itself will protect you a certain amount, but most importantly, in the strong legal agreement, which deals with questions of delinquency, with questions of exit, with who's responsible for what costs, so that you never get anywhere near getting into financial trouble. And I'll talk more about that. Exit strategy, people always want to know about that. So generally we suggest a model where you don't allow a sale, or at least a sale of the whole property, a forced sale, for a 3 to 5 year period up front. So you don't want someone to get in and then change their mind and immediately force a sale and have everybody forced to take a loss because of commissions and property transfer tax and the emotion of having to move and all that stuff. But generally, after that lockout period is over, when one party wants to sell, we suggest a 3-stage process. Stage 1, the remaining partner has the right to buy out the leaving partner, and the legal agreement will define kind of how you value the share, how you value the property as a whole, and therefore what the share would cost. If the partner can't buy you out, historically, that's what would happen when people bought properties together in the 70s. They'd lived together for 10, 15 years, and at some point, property values would have gone up and people's employment would have gone up, and they'd be able to take out more money on a new mortgage and then buy their partner out. But these days, that's harder and harder to do with the price of real estate where it is, and the cost of borrowing money. So that would then, if your partner can't buy you out, you move on to stage 2. And stage 2 is something that CoHo has been pioneering and showing that you really can do this, which is that both parties attempt to find a third party to replace the leaving party. So you either through your own social sphere, your own networks, you find someone else who can come in, or by working with the CoHo BC network, and we're CoHo affiliated realtors, we've been able to help people sell shares through MLS and through our own networks to find new partners. And that new partner would have to be approved by the remaining parties. It's not just anybody who wants to come in, but somebody who's willing to sign on to the legal agreement and has been approved as someone who the remaining party would feel comfortable wanting to be with. So by having the steps 1 and 2, it provides a pathway for a party who wants to stay to be able to stay. But if those 2 don't work, if you're not able to find a new partner and your partner can't buy you out, step 3, which is that after this is over, the party who wants to leave can force a sale of the property as a whole. This step 3 gives the partner the protection to know that there is a pathway out for them and their equity, and also provides some security to the value of the shares, because you know that you can always force a sale in the property as a whole. So this exit strategy becomes a balance of each party and trying to find a pathway for the one to stay, but knowing that the one who leaves needs a pathway out. So if after that 5-year period you can't find a new partner and you can't buy them out, you sell the property, hopefully this has been a very successful relationship. It worked really well for that period of time. You take your equity and you move on to whatever the next housing choice is for you. So I keep referring to this co-ownership agreement, right? This legal document that you will develop with the lawyers, and again, hopefully the experienced lawyers that CoHo can refer you to. And these are the questions that the CoHo professional agents will help you kind of discuss in advance while you're creating your vision for the property, so you understand what you're getting into even before you take it to the lawyers. So the questions you'll want to address are, how's the financing working, right? What's the initial contributions and the ongoing contributions? Are you each putting in the same amount and then mortgaging the same amount? Or is one person putting in more cash, but the other person's paying off more of the mortgage, etc.? And then how does that translate into your forms of ownership and your percentage of ownership, right? So are you going to be owning as tenants in common, which is the most common form where everyone has the rights to their own portion, versus a joint tenancy, which is how married couples usually purchase, where there are rights. It's more of a shared ownership specifically, and you have a right of inheritance over the other person's party. If there's a large group of people buying together, we often see them exploring ideas of corporate structures or co-op structures. People are now looking at long-term leases as models to create these communities. So what's the legal structure that's going to underpin your relationship? What percentage is everyone going to own in that? And that, of course, will relate generally to their initial contributions and their ongoing contributions. What is the purpose and vision of this property? So is it an own? Are you all going to live on the property? And so who gets access to what space? Is one person going to live on the property? The other person is an investor, and so therefore, what are the goals associated with that? If there's a rental income, how is that allocated, or is this a rental property specifically you're co-owning? Property management, right? How will the property be managed? Who's responsible for what? Your respective roles, responsibilities. Shared resources and expenses. The picture covered up some of this. But again, what are your duties? How are you going to allocate expenses? Is it based on your ownership percentage? Is it based on your occupancy percentage? Is it related to your management? Any rules of conduct? Do you want to have quiet hours? Do you want to have rules around what can and can't be done on the site? I mean, looking with rural properties, we have rules around, animal slaughter sometimes is or isn't allowed, burning is or isn't allowed, smoking, and any property can be discussed is or not. So all that stuff would go into there. That's also in the rules, right? What rules and visions will guide the housing. And then I talked before about delinquency. So what if one of the co-owners does not follow through with their financial obligations? And we help you create a system. Generally, it involves a grace period. So for up to 3 months or up to $5,000 or $10,000, one partner will cover the other partner. But then if they continue to be delinquent, then it triggers a forced sale of the property, or forced sale of the share, I should say, not covers the whole, first of the share. And so you can force them out of the relationship to find a new co-owner who can take on their responsibilities, or you can force the sale of the property as a whole if need be to recoup the money. You try to set that grace period far below their liquidity in the property, their equity in the property. So if you have a $10,000 grace period and they have $100,000 in the property, they're unlikely to try to force themselves out over that small amount, especially when you start putting in things like all costs associated with the sale of the share will be borne by that person. Some groups put in punitive penalties. So if you are forced me to sell you out, then you're going to pay a $50,000 penalty or a certain percentage of your equity. So again, you put in these levels of protection so that there's always enough equity in the property that if someone does go delinquent, you can sell them off or sell it off to still be protected for yourself, but that no one's going to ever get near delinquency because the penalties and the burden of being delinquent is such that they would beg or borrow, and hopefully not steal to be able to afford to stay in the relationship. What social framework do you want? How are decisions going to be made? This is particularly important with larger groups, but is also important with small groups to just kind of decide, what kind of, are you doing a majority vote system? Are you doing a pure consensus-based? There's lots of different versions of sociocracy and other things that, that people can use to create nonviolent communications that they might want to create as a basis for communication. How often are you going to have meetings? Are you going to be meeting twice a year to talk about the finances and the building, or more or less? How will you resolve conflict? When might you choose to bring in an outside mediator? And as I've already discussed, exit strategies. So when one party wants to sell their interest, and it's not if, it's when, right? This will eventually happen. Hopefully it's, it goes in line with your timeline, and it's, it's not immediate, but at some point somebody is going to want to move on or need to move on from this relationship, and so you plan for it accordingly. And that's what all this is about, right? It's about having the hard conversations when things are good, not doing it when you're dealing with a death or dealing with a divorce or your relationship is strained, not having to have those conversations at that moment when you're in financial difficulty, but having all of them now in advance when you're on good terms and you're all healthy and you're feeling optimistic. But then when the time comes, you don't have to argue, you don't have to go to court, you just look at your document and say, okay, we planned for this. What does it say? And people ask all the time, like, does the co-ownership agreement stand up in court? And the reality is it almost never goes to court. It does stand up in court, but it almost never goes to court, because by having the agreement itself, right, you never need to get to anywhere near to conflict stage. You just look at it. We discussed this already. Here's our plan. Let's implement it. So as I said, this will come to an end, but we do describe this much like a marriage, right? Because you are entangling your life, your housing, your finances, and your social life to a certain degree with another person or group of people. And so the process is like marriage. It's just not to death do you part. It's until the time comes for us to move on in our lives. So the first stage in all of this is dating, home dating and partner dating. So in home dating, it's working with a realtor who specializes in co-ownership to understand what's available in your region, in your price point, that is shareable and that suits your needs. So generally, if there's been a few properties sold, 20 properties sold that meet your need last year, there'll be somewhere between 15 and 25 properties that meet your needs this year, looking forward. So they can help look at the past market and the current market to help you understand what opportunities are available for you in housing generally. Concurrently, you're talking to potential partners, to your friends, to your family, about what it is you need from housing, what your timelines are, what your goals are, and also, what your housing quirks are. You want to be very transparent. You want to go into this openly and for success. What your vision is, how you want to kind of see yourself growing. So you want to find the partner that's right for you, that lines up. And if you're looking to buy as roommates, we encourage folks to try a trial rental together. I mean, oftentimes we have, when we're working with co-buying roommate groups, collective living groups, they're already living together, which is great. So they've been together for a couple of years, and now they're realizing that they can make great roommates and might as well own instead of renting. If you're coming in with friends, but you aren't yet renting together, maybe try finding a place for a few months and just making sure that you want to get married. Housing married, that is. And then when you found the right partner and you understand what you're looking for in terms of housing, it's the engagement phase. And the engagement phase, you get really into the deep, right? You discuss your finances and you get pre-approved at the financial institution. You negotiate and draft your partnership agreement. So working first with your CoHo BC Real Estate Pro to kind of help structure a vision, and then taking it to a lawyer, CoHo Pro lawyer with experience in this, to implement it as a contract. Again, ideally at this engagement stage, so that it's already in place when you go to sign on an offer, on a contract. You may have to change a few things, the address of the property, the exact amount of investment, but all the big decisions have been made and you've agreed on a product, so you can go, so you don't put yourself into a legal limbo where you've committed to buy a property before you've committed to a system with each other. And then together now you narrow down your housing type, your budget, your timeline, and you start the shopping process. And so that's the marriage, right? You go out there, you find a home, you put in the offer, you purchase it, you get your shared mortgage, you sign your your partnership agreement, ideally during the subject period before you remove subjects. And then you throw a great housewarming party and you invite all of us at CoHo to come celebrate your collective ownership. So, I mean, that's the basics, but as I said, co-ownership can really take many, many forms. Some of the other variations on this that we see are co-development, friends coming together to buy land and then build on that land. Much of the province now is zoned for multiplexes under the new provincial laws, and there's a lot of space in our city for duplexes. So you can build out, buy the land together. Co-ownership in this case often becomes a stage. It's not the long-term goal, because once you build these multiplexes in most of the province, they can be stratified, although not everywhere. You can do heritage conversions where you take some of those large heritage homes, instead of making them rental suites, you can actually stratify them up into strata suites. We see farming communities coming together, co-housing, etc. So co-development can be a stage towards what is futurely a stratified, or possibly not, but usually a stratified product down the road, but you still have to take all that due diligence during the development stage to protect yourselves. And if you already own land, you can work with partners to build out that land, to bring other people onto it as well. Co-investment I referred to already, right? Your partner does not necessarily need to be someone you live with. They can be a friend who has some money, wants to get into the market. Maybe they don't need that. They don't need that now, but they want 5 years from now to have a little equity that has grown with the market, or they want to help you get into the market so they can own a share in your property while you live there and pay all the costs, pay the mortgage. So it's a great investment from their perspective, because they have the absolute best tenants and no responsibilities, because their close friend or family member is the co-investor with them and will take care of all that stuff. But again, even in that situation, all the same rules and processes really apply to protect yourself, right? When the investor wants out, how do they get out if the owner still wants to stay there? What are the terms of the investment? Are they just taking, the growth in the real estate market, or are they taking some share of the down payment and principal on the mortgage, etc.? So you really have to think through how you would structure a co-investment like that. And then we also see co-owned, a lot of friends these days coming together to do co-owned cooperative farms, commercial endeavors, vineyards and distilleries, agritourism business, education business, and of course, rental properties. A lot of people getting into the market for the first time by pooling their money and buying a rental condo or a rental house. So just to review, things to consider before a co-purchase is the qualities of an ideal partner, what your social framework is, what your governance would be, what your financing, what form of ownership, what zoning, what timeline, what exit strategy, and much more, which is, again, why preparation is essential and why CoHo BC exists. We didn't invent co-ownership. It's been going on forever, but we're really trying to professionalize it and to create and to protect people so that we never hear the horrible stories about co-owners who didn't do this stuff and end up in the courts disputing how to get out. So that's the basic presentation. But I think one of those interesting parts of today is that we actually have a number of groups of friends who bought together last year, who are here to talk a little bit about their experiences, and buying together and now owning together. Sorry, let me just change. So, okay, so thank you, Laura and Emily, Vic and Claire, Christian and Noriko, for being here today and for sharing your experience. This is a photo down here of Christian and Noriko and their crew who bought a collective home. But I'm going to stop the share so we can see you guys and change the security settings so that you can actually unmute yourself and start your video. And then we'd love to hear from you a little bit, just for a few minutes, about why you chose to buy with friends versus buying on your own, what advantages you've seen from owning with a friend or going through the buying process with a friend, what advantages you experienced, any challenges you faced, again, either in the buying process or now living together, and maybe a little bit about how buying with CoHo BC and working with an agent who works with CoHo BC helped you navigate this that you feel like you might not have been able to do on your own. So again, thank you, Laura, Emily, Vic, Claire, Christian, and Enrico, or whoever, which ones of you are here today. If why don't we start with Laura and Emily? Just because I can, if they're with us. There's too many names here to find. I see an Emily. Okay. Fantastic. There's Vic and Claire. Emily, are you with us and able to unmute, or should we start somewhere else? All right. Well, we figure that out. Why don't we start with Vic and Claire, because I see you guys right there on my screen. And to everyone else, there will be definitely have time after the people speak to ask some questions about their experience. And of course, to ask myself, Brian, and David about some of the professional sides of it. So we'll all be here for a question and answer session. So please stick with us. So yeah, Vic and Claire, thank you for being here. Please tell us a little bit about what you guys did, why you did it, the advantages, the challenges, and how it's all worked for you.
Thanks, Noam. Good to see you again. I'm Vic, this is Claire.
Hi.
We live in a side-by-side duplex with some really good friends in East Van, and we bought this place together a year ago,
Yeah, a little over a year ago.
December of last year. I wrote down a couple of notes from the questions Noam sent us. Do you wanna
Do you want me to kick it off? Okay. I mean, I think it's pretty similar to what Nim's already covered, but there were a lot of reasons that co-ownership made sense for us. I think the first one is co-ownership does make owning a house more financially accessible. And we all think about the upfront costs, but then the ongoing carrying costs are also more accessible. You need to get a new roof for your house, you only have to pay for half of it. You need to get some renos done, you want to set up a garden, like it's all just more affordable to do it with more people, which is really nice. And then there's just an intentionality to community that really resonated with us. We wanted to live next to our friends. We wanted to not just co-own, but co-live with people. And so it's really nice to, live next door to really good friends who we see a lot of.
Other things is this is all four of our first times owning a home. And so we think having four adults is probably the right number of people to remember to do many things, such as paying things on time and remembering to, do all of the day-to-day things of co-ownership of home ownership. We, like Claire said, we see our friends 3 to 4 times a week. We walk their dog. We, mow each other's lawn. We did all sorts of things like that. That really was how we envisioned home ownership anyway. And so it's nice that that was actually doable. In terms of challenges, we really do have to negotiate everything, not just between ourselves, but now between two other adults that might have their own priorities and their own timelines. It really helped to have kind of started off on similar, with all of these conversations prior to even approaching CoHo and having started off with similar values in terms of what we were looking for. Other challenges was that, you might not be on the same timeline or budget, like timeline or budget in terms of timeline. So, we might want to put in more money up front for certain things, but your neighbors and co-owners might want to delay that for a couple years for other reasons. And so really we're having a lot of those types of conversations. And then financially, the other thing that was quite nice was that we were able to so Claire and I own 55% of the property, but live in 50% of it. And that was, through a lot of conversations about what financial means we had as a group and individually. And then can I talk about
Sure.
CoHo?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the other challenge that I'll just throw in there too is there is a lot of vulnerability because you kind of have to expose all your finances and all your values to someone. So yeah, there is just like a lot of trust and vulnerability that exists, which can be both a joy and a challenge, depending on who you're doing it with. And then yeah, the advantages for us of working with CoHo BC. It was helpful. Noam and Joanne knew what resources were available and shared a lot of good resources in terms of like guiding some of the discussions that we had. Um, they understood the mortgage structure. We didn't have to approach someone and be like, hey, we want to do this thing and then have to explain it. They helped and explained a lot of things to us too, which was really useful. Um, and yeah, there's just like really good templates, really good guidance for those conversations. Um, they kind of already have their fingers on the pulse of which houses, like using them as realtors. They already knew kind of which houses might be good fits and could talk us through some of the pros and cons of different properties, which was nice. Um, and yeah, they had connections with um, like mortgage brokers and lawyers to navigate co-ownership agreements, um, which was also helpful. So we like co-owning. It's pretty fun.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. If people have questions for them, we'll come back to questions after we've heard from all three of our speakers. I will just say, you're talking about having the eye on the pulse of the housing. Every once in a while, there's a house that you see that you're like, this needs to be co-owned. And you start going through all your networks to be like, who's going to be the one to get this house? It is ideal for it. And sometimes it's heartbreaking because people aren't, their timing's not right, or the budget's not right, and you can't put people in place. But every once in a while, that right person comes along and you're able to create it. And Vic and Claire's was one of those, a house that I'd been watching for a while and saying this needs the right buyer, and I kept bringing people out to, and then finally we found the right group of friends to come along and pick it up, and I'm delighted to see that you guys are succeeding in that home because it was clearly meant for people like you. Okay. Um, I see Christian and Noriko and a little one running behind. So I will ask you guys to speak next. And Laura and Emily, if you guys are here, are able to unmute yourself and share your video so you can come up next. Please, Christian and Noriko, introduce yourself, tell us your story, and tell us a bit about, the opportunities, the challenges, what brought you here, and how it all played out.
A lot of things, yeah. So I guess I'm Christian. This is
Noriko.
Noriko. Not shown are three kids and my wife. One of the kids is getting picked up from Girl Guides. The other two are just eating on the other side of the table here. And I guess we lived together as housemates already. So
and before that, we know each other for quite a few years, more than
like,
10
I don't know,
years?
10, 15 years or something.
Yeah.
We've been good friends for a long time. And Nina, my partner, and I had been renting like sort of a larger house and like had various housemates. And then eventually, brought in Noriko as a housemate, and then we were living there quite happily for quite some time until, I don't know, 2 or 3 years or something like that. And then we got kicked out. The landlord gave us they said they're moving in, but then they didn't move in, but we got our year's rent. So I guess all's fair. So then, we were getting kicked out, and then it's like, well, are we going to go and rent another place together? Or are we going to go our separate ways? Or are we going to buy a house together? And so then we decided that we would like to keep living together because, we like having each other around. And so that's I guess why we decided to live to purchase together. And I guess the advantage of that is that we do still enjoy each other's company.
So this is very important for us because we share actually living room, kitchen. So it's not duplex. We are sharing one single townhouse. So we have separate bedrooms, but the bathroom and kitchen and then basement, garage, these are shared living spaces.
Yeah.
So we know each other as a roommate. We know the level of tidiness or how to communicate nicely. So that really helps to go through all the process. So obviously it's important to have that day-to-day operation, but you know, there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of financial, things and what to do, contingency plan, and then some legal document to go through. So having that kind of trust and then good basis for communication. That's without that, I don't think I could ever do the co-housing. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to live together,
Yeah.
I think it would be very worthwhile to live together first
Yeah.
before you own a house, because
Yeah,
the
exactly.
level of commitment is a lot less.
Yeah.
One thing we did at some point with our other prior housemates, at some point we did have another housemate with kids, and that I think I would not do that again. I think when it comes to having kids and adults and other families with other, you can talk to another adult about all sorts of things and, maybe come to some sort of agreement. But if you want to talk about how like kids are being raised like that, it might as well be religion, right? So I think if you have kids and you might initially think that like, oh, another family with kids would be great, and the kids it'll just be like one big happy family. But
if it's a duplex and then not really sharing the actual core of the like a living space, two family with the kids would work.
Could be great, maybe.
But yeah, in the same household, one roof, same kitchen, then that it can be really tricky.
Yeah, it was really tricky with the other people with kids when we were living together as renters. So.
And then all those, financial and then the space advantages, just
they're real.
Yeah, it's real. And then also, this is the first time home buying for us as well. So someone to talk to go through the steps, or finding lawyer for or try to find the mortgage that's right for us. Having someone to talk to is really helpful for me, because I'm a single. So if I were looking for a place just for myself, I needed to do it all by myself. But with the good trusting partners, that was really helpful as well.
Yeah, like having the CoHo BC affiliated person, it was useful to have sort of access to resources. Their template for the legal agreement was where we started.
Yeah,
that was good. Really their list of lawyers was good. We sent messages to a wide variety of lawyers in terms of looking over our agreement, and actually only people who were already on the list that we got even returned our message. So yeah, it's you might think that like lawyers are flexible and looking for work, but I think that maybe there's enough work out there for them that they only really do what they want to do. I think for a mortgage, we tried mortgage brokers, and at the end we went with Van City, which was our existing bank, because they can do the mixer mortgage thing, which was very, very nice for us. So we each have our own terms, but we, obviously everybody is ultimately responsible for the whole thing. And at the end, in terms of just the numbers, like the rates, actually Van City's rates were better than what the mortgage broker came up with anyway. So I don't know who they were talking to. They didn't talk to Van City, but.
Fantastic. Well, thank you.
So, very positive experience for us.
Yeah, it's been good.
Thank you. I'm glad the home. How long have you been in your home now?
We moved in the early summer, late spring.
Like end of June.
Yeah.
Like last week of June, we moved in, and that's Christmas and New Year.
Yeah.
We're glad to help you find the right home and to put the structure together that you guys are happy with. I'm really glad to hear that for both of you, this has really worked out well.
Yeah.
We were supposed to have one more group, but I don't believe they're here. I put out a couple calls for Laura or Emily. but I don't see you on the list, and I haven't seen you unmute yourself. So in which case, I'll take a moment now to open the floor to questions. People can unmute themselves, or they can raise their hand. The chat is now open. And then after a few questions, we will just do a little closing to the presentation, tell you a little bit more about what's coming up in the CoHo BC universe and how to get connected. And then Brian, David, and myself certainly will just stick around and talk to people a little more if they want to. So, but I see Roberta has raised her virtual hand. So please, thank you for being here today. What's on your mind?
Hi, the first group explained that they were 55 and 45%. I'm curious, the second group, what kind of percentage split did you settle on in the home ownership?
That's a good question. So we're 25-75. So Noriko owns 25% and we own 75% of the equity. And then how we kind of divided the space was like Noriko has the biggest bedroom, so she has the master bedroom. She has some like her own private space, and then we have we have our bedroom for us, and we have a bedroom for the kids, and then technically the whole rest of the house is shared, but obviously children kind of dominate whatever space they're in, right? So like Noriko has access to the living room, but the kids kind of dominate.
Yeah, there are a lot of craft. So we have a craft area and living area, and then these things. There's always some ongoing projects. So
Totally. No, that's a really, really smart split. I think that makes some good sense. And what do your families think about it? Like, do you have interesting conversations with the next layer of people on your choices?
My family did not question it at all. They just thought it was, but I mean, I guess we'd already been living together for a while, and they knew Noriko as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's cool. Neat. Well, thanks for sharing. It was really, really interesting, both groups. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Vic, did you have an answer to the question about how your friends or family reacted to what you were doing?
When we told my parents what we were doing, they wondered if they could be the co-owners instead.
They wanted to be part of it.
I think everyone understands why we're doing it. I think especially with our friend group, like we're probably one of the only peoples that co-own part of a house. Never mind, like nobody owns a home, and so I think there's a lot of people that are interested in the model and really understand why we would have done that.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Thank you.
And I just want to say, you asked about percentage of ownership, and I think Vic and Claire's example of how they were able to structure the ownership based on the particular people involved really speaks to this, right? So the starting point is usually that you structure your ownership based on your occupancy, and so you would tend to do 50-50, but that doesn't always create the reality that you need in terms of what people can afford and what they can bring. So you can structure it, in a variety of different ways that really suit your needs. And just because they own 55, again, but the ongoing costs are split 50-50 based on occupancy. And similarly for Noriko and Christian, it'd be hard to give an exact valuation of, okay, well, here's the amount of, I mean, you can measure the size of each bedroom. So how much privacy space do you have and how much collective space, and figure out a direct allocation. Or you can say, okay, this is what works for both of us. We both feel like this is fair. At the end of the day, if both of you feel like you're benefiting, it doesn't really matter if there's maybe a slight more benefit to one or the other, if it really creates pathways for both. So we really have that creativity to structure according to your needs. Okay, Michael, I see your hand is up. Please, thanks for being here. But we can't hear you. We can see you, but we can't hear you. It says you're unmuted, but we still can't hear you. Nope. All right. I'm gonna take the next question while you talk off in the distance. When you finally interrupt us, we'll know that you have your sound going.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Maybe it was my earbud.
There you
sorry
are.
about that. So yeah, thank you very much for this. And I also want to say too, like, Noam, you helped me and another, my family and another family put together a co-ownership agreement for on the we co-owned some property on one of the Gulf Islands, and that was really appreciated and really helpful. And then I have a question for how do you think the multiplex new possibilities might open up like possibilities for people, especially, and I couldn't tell if Vancouver is part of that or separate from that, or what do you think about the opportunities for co-ownership? And then secondly, it's probably too new, but I'm curious if there's ever been yet where somebody has sold their percentage in a co-ownership, if that's happened yet or not. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the multiplex zoning again is this provincial legislation that's been adopted through much of the province. Some of the municipalities have fought against it, but most have followed through. That allows for the building of 4 to 6 units on most single family neighborhoods, most single family lots. And in most regions, the multiplexes are allowed to be stratified, which is a much better option. I mean, as much as I sell co-ownership, stratification is just easier for everybody all around. And if you can have the best of both worlds, if you can have stratification with intentional community, which is basically what most co-housing initiatives are, then you've really created an ideal form of housing. So I think the multiplex potential to get groups of friends together to buy a piece of land, to build something to suit their needs, and then to each own their piece outright is huge. And so in that case, co-ownership would be a stage, and then the end product would be a product even better than co-ownership. It's a strata product, but still with intentionality and presumably affordability if you're hopefully building yourself, right? I mean, one of the biggest reasons you can get co-ownership, is because, discounts in price oftentimes has to do with the fact that you're not paying some of the higher costs that go along with stratification, some of the legal fees and some of the code regulations and that you need to do, or you can use an existing housing type, right? That's already there. So you're buying older housing. So it's gonna be a little bit harder to create the affordability piece on that element. But certainly the community and the building of exactly what you need makes a lot of sense. And then in some municipalities, the multiplexes are required to be non-stratified. So the idea is they're actually going to be rental units for most people, but you could certainly do a co-ownership model on something like that.
I just posted a link in the chat there to an upcoming event specifically on that topic, March 31st.
And yes, there is. That's right. Thank you, Brian, for mentioning that. And Michael, you had a second half to your question. Oh, those things are coming in left and right. Good. I don't remember what the second half to your question was anymore.
The question was, has anyone sold? I'll jump in.
Yeah, Brian, go for it.
Yeah, I just sold a 30% portion of a 5-acre property in Arrington, and it just worked out really wonderful. It provided the property owner to, access her funds and retire comfortably in her home. There was a full duplex that she owned, so she gets to live in her half duplex. And this another lady about her same demographic, senior, single female, showed up and was really ready to look at this seriously. And doing it on the MLS, it really lit a fire under me as a co-ownership specialist. And really, if I'm bringing this to, the market, right? There's a lot of agents who don't know how this works, and it's really been interesting. I've seen, the interest has been tremendous. I've done 2 sales in the last year, one on Gabriola and one in Arrington, both on acreages, and it really created this win-win situation. And I educate the other agents through the process too, because sometimes you have a buyer who's just ready to pay full price or even more without realizing that there's so much more to it. So it really, I created an agreement overview with through our checklist and our resources. So when agents reached out to me saying, how does it work? they go to that agreement overview that was there so they could read it, 5-page document. And it really helped educate everyone involved through the process. And we go through the initial conversation stage when the interested parties show up, and it's really special where the vendor meets the buyer, and the agents kind of take the back seat. So we just kind of, stick handle things accordingly and provide full transparency. So it worked out just great, on both occasions. It really did, and yeah, so it's really heartwarming now because it is a lot of work. But if the seller's up for it, it really is. The win-win is tremendous. When you follow up and you see this affordable housing. This lady who bought this half duplex, who has access to the 5 acres, Vancouver Island. It was the best deal around, and my client's super happy with that. And a big part of it is the ongoing costs and responsibilities and shared maintenance to take that burden off too. So
and the examples Brian's giving here are people who owned the whole property themselves and then sold off a share to find a new partner. And David Hale did a similar thing with his own home in Victoria. We've also now started working with groups who are selling co-ownership groups, and one party wants to leave and one party wants to stay. So we sold half a house in Vancouver off of Trout Lake Park last year, and working on selling another one at the moment. So yes, that is happening. There's a lot of really good questions coming in on the chat, and there's hands up, so we're going to keep running through them. I will ask for the hands up, if any of you have questions that are directed specifically at Christian, Noriko, or Vic, I'll ask you guys to go first so that they don't necessarily have to stick around through as I answer all the rest of the questions. So anyone who's got a question specifically for them, please throw it out now, and then we will thank them and send them on their way and keep going through the rest of your questions. So Donna, is your question for our co-owners?
Yes, I do actually. Thanks very much. This is so interesting. Thanks, Naomi. I've been on a call before. I suppose I did ask a question in the chat because I couldn't find the hand, but about the mortgage and splitting it and having different rates. Because earlier on in your presentation you said there's one mortgage. But then how does it work and actually splitting it? Because obviously somebody might have be more financially secure and be able to secure a lower interest rate as opposed to somebody else. How does that really work?
So I guess we're both ultimately responsible for the entire value of the mortgage. So if Noriko fails to make her mortgage payments, then there's a bunch of stuff in our agreement about how that deals with, like, we'll temporarily cover her, but like at some point, you just basically have to sell if you can't afford the whole thing. But so yeah, we're both ultimately responsible for the entire value of the mortgage, but then we both basically just have our own piece. So we've got our 75%, and we put our down payment towards that, and now we make our mortgage payments according to the rate and the rate and term length that we have. And Noriko put down her down payment towards her portion of the mortgage, and has her own rate and term. And then I guess obviously the total down payment has to be enough to make like the bank's minimum for the entire mortgage. But other than that, it's fairly independent.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. So one party could go variable, one party could go fixed, one party could have 50% down, the other party only 20% down. You really have, one could do a 3-year term, one could do a 5-year term, and then the bank just withdraws the payments for each of the different segments of the mortgage separately from your separate accounts.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, Annette, you have your hand up.
Yes. So I have a friend, and literally it's not me, it's a friend who is living in a cottage that is attached to or belongs to a bigger house I live on Gabriel as well. And she is thinking of buying into the property. It's owned by 2 elderly people. And it just seems a little dicey to me, given the age difference and whatnot. So I'm just wondering, how can she buy in and yet protect herself financially?
And this is a good example of another service that Coho offers, which is consulting. Which is sometimes you don't need a real estate agent, and you will need a lawyer, but you don't want to have to pay, their $400 to $500 an hour up front. So Coho offers consulting and the resources that we have that go along with it. So it's going to be unique in every situation, but in this case, I mean, certainly she has to plan for the fact that the timeline that they would remain co-owners is limited, right? And so it has to make sense that if they're, if within 3 years or 5 years, they're forced to sell the property as a whole because it's been inherited by their children who don't necessarily want to get into this, complicated co-ownership arrangement or don't want to continue to hold this Gabriola property. So planning for that inevitable exit, is something that you'll want to keep in mind. If
Yeah,
they're
no, I'm working on something similar to that here in my community, and that's sorry to jump in, but just it's further to security for that type of endeavor where you have young mixing with the elderly, and that's where you want to talk to the grandkids and you want to see who's going to be inheriting the property, and you want to have those kind of conversations of the legacy of the land and what the long-term plan is, and a big part of making those decisions and answering that question depends on financial aspirations and capabilities and capacity. So, sometimes there's a lot of equity in the home, and you've got a young buyer who maybe has a couple $100,000, and so depending on how much money you buy into the property, that would fluctuate your obligations to the financing. In this situation, the elderly couple could provide vendor financing. So there's really interesting ways of supporting a financial model that could work depending on everyone's financial situation. But that, when you have that's what we call 1 + 1 = 3 when our young and our elderly combine forces, where an elderly person may have a few $100,000 of equity or cash, and where young people don't have any down payment, but they have a good monthly income, right? So you can really support each other in that capacity. So I'd be happy to talk to you further, and make connect with your friend or whoever. But anyways.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess
Yeah.
they have to worry about wills and things like that, how all that, shakes out, because I know that she would like to buy the property eventually, but as you say, it is the financial aspect that
Well,
they've got to.
absolutely. You could create a creative arrangement where upon death, she assumes the property, but there's a clause that makes her kind of forced to pay the heir, a percentage of the market value of the property, if that's what the heir would want. So you can actually have those conversations,
Mhm.
like in perpetuity. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
So does anyone else have any questions that are specific to our co-owners in the room, or I will thank them and go on to the many other really good questions that are piling up in the chat. Okay, so Vic, I think we've lost Claire at this point, but Vic, Christian, and Noriko, thank you guys so much for sharing your experience. And it is just so exciting to see these successful, and this is why we do this, right? We do this to create happy housing. And it's really always wonderful to be able to actually see people happily in their homes together, successful. And so we thank you for sharing your stories and for being with us and for trusting us to guide you through this process to set you up in your new homes.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So a question here from the chat. What is the range of terms of how long groups tend to take to move through the process before putting in their first offer? And range is the right term there because, the process of talking about what goes into a co-ownership agreement, most of the groups that we work with kind of are able to push through that in, 3 to 4 hours of sitting down, expressing what their visions are, what their goals are, looking through our templates of how we generally suggest the agreement be done, navigate changing some things slightly to match their own needs. And generally most of the social, economic, and legal structure can be done in 2 or 3 meetings together. And then, much like any real estate purchase, it's about figuring out the market and what fits your budget and what fits your housing. So, some groups come to us and within, a week or two are putting in offers on properties. And some groups take months to kind of have their conversations because they're slow at it, or they want to go in a little bit longer, take a long time, or they really want to educate themselves on the market, or their timing is just not ready to go anyways in the first place. So, you know, generally it's going to be 5 or 6 hours of work to get to know the market and to get to know each other and have those conversations to start to identify what you're looking for. But so it can be quick, or it can be slow. A friend of mine is thinking of buying into an existing mortgage/home with an elderly couple.
I think we
Okay,
just
that's the
spoke about
question
that.
we just talked about, exactly. When you have an external investor, i.e. not living in your home, do they tend to help pay the mortgage too, or are they just contributing to the down payment? So again, every situation is unique, but the majority of the time when we're working with people like that is someone will just contribute to the down payment, and then the ongoing costs of ownership are usually borne by the occupant. Sometimes there are certain categories of things that are considered costs of ownership that you might ask your partner to pay, so like insurance and taxes. Sometimes we'll see a decision that's something that someone's going to pay out of pocket. But generally, for this to be appealing to an investor, right? I mean, if someone invests in real estate, generally, they're usually going to invest in a property that has cash flow or at least breaks even. And so to ask someone to invest in your home, generally, they're not going to want to be having to feed the property as time goes on. I mean, if they're a parent, or a very wealthy friend, it might be a different story. So most people create a structure by which the occupier is responsible for all the costs associated with ongoing for the property, and the investor just puts money in and is really a silent investor on that front. Now, capital improvements, when a roof needs to be done or something like that, that's also going to increase value in the property. Again, that's a time when you might go to them and say, I need an influx of cash. But for just the normal average ongoing costs, usually not. And then what do they get back in return? I think I referenced this earlier, but the other question for the investor is, are they just riding the market? Are they getting a percentage of the mortgage principal reduction? So it's about creating a balance of a return that they're going to appreciate. They don't necessarily need that. If they're putting in it, and how is their money being, their ownership percentage being calculated? Is it calculated based on the percentage of the full down payment or the percentage of the property? So if I put in 5% of the purchase price of your property, am I a 5% owner? Or because you put down 15%, so we got in at 20%, I'm actually a 25% owner. So I come in, so we're 25/75 because that was the basis of our down payment. Or because you're paying the full mortgage on the balance, I put in 5% and I am 5%. And we see both versions of this happen. So again, it's about creating a product, an agreement that's going to be appealing to the investor enough they want to put money into you, but also appealing enough to you that you're not giving up so much of your equity, and yet paying all the ongoing costs. We've already answered this question about the Vancity mixer mortgage.
Just to also say, I'm starting to realize too, I'm developing relationships with senior mortgage specialists in the larger financial institutions, and I've just come to realize that RBC can support shared financing too. So I'm learning about their product, and I'm working with a senior mortgage advisor, and she knows it, like how to put those pieces together. So sometimes it's not just about the institution, it's connecting with the right person in the institution. And that's what I'm coming to realize. Mortgage brokers are great, but when it comes to like getting like to the nitty-gritty of how to like put things together, I'm finding sometimes with co-ownership, you're better off working directly with the institution.
Yeah, and it's similarly, it's not just Vancity. Every credit union has the same software that Vancity uses to do their mixer mortgage. They just don't always understand how they can use it. right? Whereas Vancity understands the product, and there we have a colleague there who really can guide people through that piece of it. Kim asks, where could I find a partnership template to start a co-ownership conversation with my friend? We have a very basic checklist of the kind of the questions that were in this presentation on our website on the resources page. And if you reach out to one of the CoHo pros, or to the local first line of defense, the realtor in your area, definitely one of the resources we give to groups as we're starting them in the co-buying process is the draft co-ownership overview. So it's not a legal template. We really want to encourage you to talk to your lawyers, get a legal template done, but it's all the questions that you're going to need to address and then have your lawyers turn into an actual legal document. So it goes through the 10 major points for you guys to start talking about, and then you can work with your local pro to kind of answer any questions and decide which one of those systems is right for you. So we don't have that resource itself on the website, but just connect with any one of us, and we can guide you through the process with that and other resources that we have available. Donna, I see your hand is up again.
Yeah, I just want to quickly ask you on that question. Is it possible, because it's so important, this agreement, to hire a lawyer to draft something up that you can work with before you actually find a partner? So at least you've got something drawn on what you're thinking of. Because otherwise you go down the pathway and you might end up, I think that agreement is really important. So at least a template, not a list, not a checklist. I know your checklist, but something more specific to your own needs. Has anybody done that? Have you got experience in that?
Yeah. Brian, you want to answer it?
Well, yeah, that's the magic of it. That's where we have our checklist, but we also have experience. And as agents, we connect with people on an emotional level. So we work with our clients through our checklist, and we've had enough experience with lawyers that we break down clearly step-by-step process on how the property is shared, and who owns what, exclusively what is shared, the rules, what happens in default if there's going to be shared financing. A lot of people these days are leaving the banks out of it. So absolutely, and when it comes to selling portions of real estate on MLS, that is the key to the success of the sale, is having that agreement overview in place. So the property owner has already set up this idealistic form of partnership, of shared ownership on the property. And we tailor that through our, we believe in sustainability, we believe in community. That's why Noam and I do this. So there's these types of endeavors they attract community-minded people. And that's where the magic comes in, because then you have this tailor-made, this custom, it's almost like a piece of art. They're very similar, but they're always different. And then it's clear. Then we can present that to the lawyer, and now we're developing a relationship with lawyers who see value in our agreement overviews, and they take that agreement overview and they know how to put the pieces together to present the final draft of the co-ownership agreement for all lawyers representing all interested parties to review that draft, bounce back any edits, and then sign off. And as Noam would say, Yahtzee. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we're helping people sell a share of the property. Basically, that's what we do, is work with one party first to create that co-ownership vision, and then that becomes part of the sales pitch, right? When you're buying a share in a property, you're buying the property, you're buying the partner, you're buying the financial structure, and you're buying the legal structure. And we put all those pieces in place in advance. And certainly you could go all the way to get a lawyer at that stage and have the whole thing drafted, but that's spending a bunch of money on something that may or may not happen. Whereas you can work with one of us, and as part of our services, that's going to be done. It won't be a legal agreement, but it'll be all the main concepts. You'll know to discuss. So it really does accomplish much of the same thing.
100%. It's more casual, it's going into the legal office. So it really does set the stage, and lawyers are realizing that there's value in it too, because it kind of bridges, it works as a really nice bridge, as a stepping stone, like handing the file over to the lawyers. Yeah, so there's clarity there, right there.
All right, thank you. Cody, thanks for being here today.
No, thank you so much for putting this on and for all of your information so far. My question is just this. I don't know if you'll be able to answer it, but for those of us who are eligible for RSP contributions to our first home, FHSA, the first time home buyers grant, like all of those sorts of things, are they possible under a co-ownership model? And are there certain limitations to that? Like, do all of the co-owners need to be eligible for the same thing? Can it not be like I have a friend who owns his own real estate corporation. So would I be able to go in with him as one of my investors and still be eligible for those first home benefits or yes, that's my question.
The answer is yes to most of them. Every one of these benefits has their own qualifications and systems, but yeah, you can withdraw from your RSP and you can use your registered housing savings plan towards a co-owned share. Yes, you can get an exemption from the property transfer tax as a first-time home buyer in a co-owned share, but the way said you would get in relation to your percentage of ownership. So if you own 50%, you would claim 50% of the benefit. But for example, in that case, it's not about how much you own as a share, it's about the total value of the property when it comes to the exemption threshold. So if you're co-owning $1 million property, which is above the $785,000 investment threshold, you won't qualify, period, even though your share is only 500,000. So if you're co-owning a $600,000 property, yes. So it's, so the answer is it depends, but most of the time, most of those programs you would be eligible for.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, Janice.
I'm just wondering where two parties are involved in purchasing a property and one person for their share has the cash and the other person is going to have a mortgage, but quite very capable of being able to handle that mortgage. Is the cash person still responsible for that mortgage? I guess if they're on title, they probably are.
Exactly. There are occasions when people will not be on title, though generally we encourage everyone to be on title just for your own protections. Okay. So, but yeah, everyone who's on title has to be responsible for the mortgage. And that's why, really, if you're going to get in with someone who has no or very little money down, really make sure you know them and you know their situation really well, because they could, they don't have the same skin in the game, so they could walk away and leave you holding the bag. So generally we encourage everyone to have, at least enough to cover kind of, the resale costs of having to, if you're stuck holding the bag, you have to sell it off, that you're not going to be out yourself.
Yeah. And in this case, they have money to put in as well, because they would be selling their house that they've got. And so then I'm thinking in a situation like that, I'm thinking in terms of then if I want a loan for something else, that's going to hamper me from getting a loan. So I'm thinking then it might be a better situation to go in and be involved from an investor viewpoint, probably.
Yeah, I mean, again, you have to decide whether or not, as an investor, you can have, whether you want to be on title or not on title. And if you're not on title, you have the legal agreement to protect you. You can put charges on title to protect you, but it doesn't have quite the same protections. But yeah, again, every situation is unique, and we have to look at your case to figure out what makes sense for you in that moment.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot of really good questions still in the chat, and I'm going to get to them in a minute. I just want to quickly race through some of this stuff, so if people have to leave, they can. As I said, CoHo's been doing a lot of really interesting, different kinds of stuff. I won't go through all of them, but small groups, big groups, shared ownership, multiple people into a condo building, families, friends, strangers, One of my favorite examples is a group that David did in Victoria, which was two sisters who decided they wanted to buy together, but then they realized they needed a friend, and then they realized they could do even better if they brought on another partner. So they brought on a stranger they met through CoHo. So that one group is two, family, friends, and strangers all buying together in one property. So really kind of unique models all over the place. There's a couple interesting properties that people in connected to CoHo are selling at the moment. This is a project in the Kootenays, an amazing home for co-housing because it's a 6,000 square foot home on an 18-acre site without zoning, so you could do tiny homes where a community is trying to form to acquire this property, and the sellers really want to facilitate this sale to a community-minded group. I'm working on selling a half interest in a property right now in East Vancouver. Someone looking for a new partner as well. So these are a couple of the quick examples going on. There's a lot of resources on our website, particularly our YouTube channel. So if you like this presentation, we have presentations with lawyers, with financiers, with mediators, with other co-owners who've been living together for a while. There's a lot of different stuff on our YouTube channel, so you can really go much deeper into it on the YouTube channel. You can find that on our resources page. And we have our guide to co-ownership, which goes over much of this. But generally, your best way in is through starting a consultation with one of the CoHo pros. And the first line of defense is generally a real estate agent. Someone in the chat earlier asked, well, what if we don't need a real estate agent to actually find and buy the property? And you don't necessarily need one, of course. You can do stuff privately with friends, buy into a property they own. You can buy privately in general. So we are available to do consultancy work, to come in and help you kind of frame your stuff, paid on an hourly basis. But in general, a real estate agent doesn't just help you find the property, right? A real estate agent in itself helps you write a contract that makes sense. And in this case, a CoHo affiliated pro would help you understand the questions and the conversations to have in advance, would help you find property that are particularly suited for co-ownership, may help you write a contract that is the right contract that you need for multiple owners on the property, with the right subjects to make sure and would help to make sure that you get your co-ownership agreement in place in a timely fashion and connect you to the right professionals, the right lawyers, the right financiers. So, the job of a CoHo real estate agent is not just find the property, negotiate you the best price, but really guide you through the whole process, which is what the job of a good real estate agent should be in general, right? Is guide you through the house hunting process, help you figure out what is the best fit for you. And that's the other option that our agents can do as well, is that you don't have to use them for co-ownership. All of us work as traditional agents as well for the majority of our work. And so we can help you navigate what's available in the traditional market, what's available in the co-ownership market, what's available in other creative options like leasehold or co-op or other types of properties that are out there, manufactured homes, First Nations land, and how do you find the right housing solution that's right for you. So reach out to us as your first line of defense. If you don't want to hire us as an agent, you can hire us as a consultant. And if you want to bypass us and go right to the lawyers, that's fine too. We can send you a list of who the best lawyers are. They're also listed on our website under CoHo Pros. We've got a bunch of really interesting events coming up over the next few months. An event in a few weeks on financing co-owned properties with Ryan McKinley from Van City, and a really great mortgage broker who does like to think a little more outside the box than most. We have a in-person shareable homes tours to go see properties, like what it looks like in person, and also meet other potential buyers if you're looking for partners to buy with. We have one in East Vancouver in March and one on the Sunshine Coast in April. We have this workshop on co-building multiplexes, further to, was it Michael's question? So we have some really great experts coming in to speak on that event. It won't just be me all night. We have a session on selling a portion of your property, specifically to how we structure that offering and what that looks like. And then we have matchmaking events, like an online one in May. So there's a lot of stuff coming up. Please sign up for future events and try to be there. So here's our contact information, depending on the region that you're in. If you're in Victoria, please reach out to David Hale. If you're in the Kootenays, reach out to Scott Miller, who's not with us today. If you're in the Mid-Island or the Gulf Islands, reach out to Brian Horwitz. And if you're in Metro Vancouver or anywhere else in the province, please reach out to me, or you can just generally reach out to the CoHo BC main contact, and we'll make sure to connect you to the right people. So with that, I will go back to the questions that are on the chat. But first, thank everyone who was with us and who stuck with us for a full hour and 40 minutes. We are going well into overtime here, and we really appreciate your interest and your patience. You'll all now be added to the CoHo BC mailing list. You'll get a copy of this video sent to you tomorrow. So if you want to go back and rewatch it or share it with a friend, the friend you're thinking of buying with or somebody else, please do. And again, we look forward to hearing from you to see how we can actualize the right housing path for you, whether it be through co-ownership or through whatever other models make sense. David or Brian, you want to add anything before I go to these last questions?
Well, you know, I was resonating with what you were saying, that we're not just agents, and I'm coming to realize that, like being in the community and working, doing typical deals and doing co-ownership deals, and co-ownership deals are twice the amount of work, but when they happen, it's like twice rewarding. So we're not just agents; we're more than agents, and in my opinion, I don't want to like float my boat, but I think we're darn good agents because we really do get into the nitty-gritty of the minutia of shared real estate, and you know, just doing typical real estate is intense enough. So and our systems are coming together, so it really seems like the push is real. And we work with there's a lot of flakes who come to the table, but there's more people coming to the table who aren't flaky, who are really committing to the process, and that's just great because I'm seeing it's great because I see it happening and I'm thinking to myself, this should be happening more. So thanks for showing up, and you know, feel free to reach out, and we help remove fears, and then things become really, really real. So don't be scared to commit to the process because it's working, and we can help you make it work.
David, any closing comments?
Well, I'm just impressed that so many people have hung around so long. Good. Thanks so much, everyone, for absorbing this information. There's a lot here. And like Noam said, we're a group that has been creating this information for a lot of years. You know, what Noam's been talking about. You know, you can't just snap your fingers and find it. You know, we together as a collaboration have been putting this together over a long period of time. So thank you to Noam and Brian for your expertise and for continuing to plow forward. You know, there's a lot of people that are still skeptical of the concept, but I think it's the only way forward. It's the wave of the future, and you know, we're just going to have to you know, keep you know, getting the banks to come on board. I think they're more and more friendly as time goes on, and yeah, thanks for hosting, Noam.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Everyone who came.